but it did start, certainly it started with, it started with Dev. It started with Dev, um, who is our one of the two point of view characters along with Nikki. And what is now the first chapter wasn't always at the start of the book. In the first draft, it wasn't quite at the start. I sort of introduced the characters before that, but now it just starts with Dev waking up in the middle of the night or being woken up in the middle of the night, and the Gabe and Ferdy are at the front door with Dahl, this teenage boy they've kidnapped. And that was the very first thing I wrote. I wrote a version of that, um, and it pretty much is what, in terms of events and what happens, it's pretty much what the first chapter is now. It ends with Dahl being put down the basement, and Dev goes outside and is kind of freaking out as he belatedly accepts what's happening. But yeah, Dev was the first character I found, and I just liked there was something intriguing. I thought there was something in that, maybe something the length of a novel or the span of a novel, or that a novel could take about this guy who opens the door and invites or capitulates to, or sort of, is forced to, without being forced to, have this chaos and this crime, this grave situation enters life, and he lets it happen. And then, to what degree is he complicit or not? I thought that could be something I could explore over the remainder of the novel. And I was interested as well, perversely, in writing about a very, very passive, introverted character who basically never wants to interact with anyone or go anywhere. And I knew I would need to put such a character in a pretty, extreme situation to provoke them into having to interact and expose themselves and disclose things about themselves. It's relatively small scale. It gets to be revealed, but yeah. So there's money's owed by one character to some drug dealers, and the money is not forthcoming. So as an attempt at extortion or blackmail, they kidnap this teenage boy, this 16-year-old kid, Dal English he lives in Ballinatown in the west of Ireland. He's kidnapped by Gabe and Sketchferdia, who are these sort of enforcers for the drug dealers, and they bring Dahl to Dev's house. Dev is he's in his early 20s. His mother recently died, and he's basically withdrawn completely from society. He's been letting the drug dealers passively going along with them, using his house as a place to kind of keep drugs and store drugs while they sell it and distribute it. So he's already sort of entangled, but this is a new problem that's presented to him at the start of the novel. They've shown up with this teenage boy they've kidnapped. So, he realizes this is a different order of seriousness, as opposed to keeping a bag of weed or coke or whatever in his house. But so that's the premise of the novel. That's where we start. We start with a knock on the door, and these two guys are there, and they said they tell Dev, we need to keep this kid here in your house. So Nikki is the second point of view character along with Dev, and she is a 17-year-old girl who lives in Ballinatown. She's Dahl's girlfriend. She's gone out with him for a couple of years. And she's an orphan. Her parents died when she was young. Her older brother works as a trucker, so he's away a lot. So she's ended up just becoming someone who, by circumstances, become very self-sufficient. And she's in school, but she's working she works around the clock to sort of earn money for herself. And she has a car, and she ends up having to give Dahl a lot of lifts around town. And so she's a very, as you get to know in the novel, she's a very sort of together person. Her story runs along parallel with Dev's, and they're very different in some ways. I think they're very similar in others. She's got an inner life that there's no one around her, even Dahl, with whom she can really share her inner life and her concerns. And so she does the opposite of Dev. Dev is completely withdrawn, and Nikki sort of just keeps pushing herself out there. She just keeps wanting to move ahead, and one thing after another, and to not look down. I always thought of her as a character. If she looks down or looks back, she'll feel like she's lost. So she's continually, moving forward with her life, and that's that's all to the good, but then her boyfriend gets kidnapped. So in the meat of the novel, she ends up being sort of drawn into that, and is kind of the only person who even realizes Dal's missing initially, and sort of we see how the two stories ultimately converge and how Nikki is drawn into this plot. It's funny because I think they do both Nikki and Dev. It occurred to me, they are aspects of me, of course, but they're both what I think of as threshold characters. So they're not quite in the plot. You know, a different version of this novel could be written from Dahl's point of view, as being kidnapped, or a more active, the Furtier brothers, or one of the criminals. But they're, you know, both Dev and Nikki are kind of, they're on the margin of the plot. They know what's happening, or they're becoming aware of what's happening, but they've one foot out of it, and it's a question as to how much they're going to get dragged into it. And that's how I approach characters in a way. I mean, it's great, Jake. You know, I when people do say things, I mean, like I felt like the character was there with me or real. I couldn't stop thinking about them after I finished the book. I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear as a writer, that they've come alive, and there's a closeness to them, a credibility to them. But when I'm writing them, I feel like I'm approaching them from the outside, from a distance, and I sort of, like a camera panning in a movie. I slowly make my way towards them, or like you're hiking and you see a mountain, you're going to get there by the end of the day. It's going to take you 3 or 4 hours, and the pleasure is in getting there. And it's the same with me. You know, as I said, when I came up with the idea of Dev, I was struck by, here's a guy who just is not going to make any decision and just let things happen to him. What a weird character to write about, but you know, there was something there, and I wanted, you know, the whole several years I spent writing the novels figuring out this character I had an animation of, but I didn't completely understand. And Nikki as well, it was very important that she's someone who's, yeah, she's on the outside of it, and she's you know, she has a persona, she has a guise that she presents to everyone, and she's different on the inside, I think, and without even being maybe aware of that, you know. So again, that was just a she was a very intriguing puzzle in a way to try and write about. And fiction is very, you know, fiction is very, forget, it doesn't have to provide answers or resolutions to characters or explain them. I think if you can just make them real, you know, their contradictions and inconsistencies and impulses that they can control and not control, and the things they try and hide, and the things that they inadvertently reveal, as long as that's what you depict, I mean, that's what makes them feel real, I think. Yeah.
Dialogue for you. um, how does that tend to also, do you hear the characters in their own individual
Yeah, I mean,
voices?
I gotta thank my 15 years of growing up in Mayo. It's just the voices I heard my whole life, just a stream of them. And you know, I'm doing a literary version of it or whatever. So I kind of, you know, it's not just purely those voices I grew up with. There's, you know, it's there's lots of writers that would have influenced me too. But I think you can, yeah, there's just a lovely roundabout expressiveness, especially in the West. People can be very eloquent and um, talk at length, but oftentimes they're, when you go back and think about it, they kind of, they've almost, like, well, what did they actually say? They've left me with a very pleasant impression, but they've concealed themselves in some way, you know. Um, we're not straightforward people at all, and there's a slight wariness underneath all the gregarity, I think. Certainly with that's, you know, that's kind of what that's what I'm aiming for with my characters. And it's in a heightened form in Wild Houses, because there's this kidnappings happened, and there's all sorts of mystery, intrigue, and you know, um, but people talking at cross purposes, and an Irish ability to sort of sidestep and to sort of to appear to be revealing more than you are. You know, I think that's a thing I try to aim for in my dialogue. I don't know. But again, it's a very, just in terms of the day to day writing it and stuff. It's very I just find it's a great way. It's another way to open up a character and to make them come alive for you. And conversations they have their own logic. There's what people want in their hearts, and there's what you end up saying to people when you're with them. And again, rather than trying to make those things marry up, I think fiction often benefits from from just heightening the heightening the camp, you know.